From Geppetto Studios in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, welcome to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, your home for inclusive, positive geek culture, where we talk about movies, comics, music, books, and whatever else we feel like. Please welcome your host.
I was hoping a middle-aged white dude would come up and talk to me, and you have made my day, sir.
Brad Mendenhall.
Hey kids, it is episode 213 of the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast. Jarf returns to talk about Sean Connery's recent passing. We recorded during election night. It was kind of stressful. Anywho, Katie has a question.
What lesser-known book or comic character would you like to see in a TV show or a movie?
As always, a great question. In regards to book, I would say Jennifer Government by Max Barry. Last time I heard, the rights to that were owned by George Clooney. And if people aren't familiar, it's a neat sci-fi novel, sci-fi political commentary novel, or even a social commentary novel by Max Barry, who's one of my favorite authors. And it took place in either the near future or just an alternate reality where you end up basically being owned by whatever company you work for, to the point where your last name is the name of the company. So the main character, Jennifer Government, is a woman who works for the government. And so if you work for IBM, Apple, McDonald's, whatever, then your name would be Joe McDonald's, Joe whatever you have. It was really smart. Barry allowed there to be some sort of impressive action that I think would translate really well to the screen. Barry wrote an excellent novel, Syrup, that was turned into a small budget movie starring Amber Heard before she sort of had her breakthrough. In regards to comic book characters, a minor comic book character that I would like to see come to the screen, who is John Walker, the USA agent. And to people who aren't familiar, and I've mentioned him before on this show, John Walker was at one point tapped to become the new Captain America. And there was this plot line where Steve Rogers, who Chris Evans has played in the movies, was going to be forced to become an official agent for the U.S. government. He refused because he felt that it would, sort of almost similar to what happened in the Civil War movie, Captain America Civil War, where he felt he would be able to function better as a basically independent person. So he gave up the name of Captain America. John Walker became the new Captain America. For a year and a half, it showed just how important it is that Steve Rogers is actually that character, because he's a good, upright, upstanding person with strong willpower, and anyone else taking that role would fail, and John Walker failed. After he was no longer Captain America, they gave him a new costume, and he became the U.S. agent. And it was neat because it was a version of Captain America who wasn't perfect, who wouldn't make the right decisions, and I always find that interesting. I like sort of broken anti-heroes, as I think they're much more interesting. Don't get me wrong, I like Captain America fine as a character, but he's a little harder to write because you know that he's always going to make the right decision. He's always going to do the right thing. So what if you have somebody with a similar look and similar ideology and with patriotism, but a guy who doesn't have as good a judgment? And U.S. Agent is going to be in the Disney Plus series Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's going to be played by Kurt Russell's son, I think Wyatt Russell. They have shown some still shots. He's not U.S. agent. He is Captain America. From what little we've known, basically the plot is the government selects a new Captain America, who will be John Walker, and going to imagine the plot will be him coming into conflict with Falcon and Winter Soldier, and eventually they come into conflict because why else would you watch this stuff? So I'm looking forward to that. Voted? You must have. Unless you're planning on running out right after this.
Haha, no. We voted early, so already taken care of.
Doing your best to make America great again, I'm sure.
Oh, that's not even funny. Don't put that out there.
Get a picture of you, put it on the listeners page, and Photoshop a red hat.
Cancel myself. Just so people can appreciate the full story, we are recording this on Election Day. As we speak, we do not know the results. This is like a message in the bottle that we're casting out into the future. So hopefully, as you're listening to this right now, Joe Biden has been declared president. But who knows? We don't know. So basically, we're going to have a fun conversation because it's something to do instead of going crazy checking the news all night.
What are you using to follow the results? Or what are you planning on using? We're recording this at 6:56. No results have come in yet, except for like there's 10 votes counted in New Hampshire or something like that.
Right. Washington Post right now. And then I want to hop off at 8 and switch on MSNBC. Steve Kornacki is going to be at the big board. Then I can start watching things in real time.
I remember 2016 watching him at the big board. Folks, you might not remember. I mean, they joked about how Trump was getting crushed. I mean, weeks leading up to it, SNL would just have a joke. It's like, well, we're introducing, let's just call her now the president, Hillary Clinton, because it looked like it was going to be such a crushing defeat. And seeing the talking heads on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, wherever you're watching, just all looking like, what the hell? They were all just shocked.
I don't know how much time we want to spend on dated election talk, but just one final note, because this is one of the reasons my wife wanted to try to stay up as late as possible and see as much of the real-time responses, is because that is something that she missed in 2016. And I shared with her that experience of seeing people learn that Trump was getting elected and how shocked they were. And in particular, what's always stayed with me is Richard Engel. He's a foreign correspondent. His beat is going to the most dangerous places on earth. So he's reported from conflict in Afghanistan and did a special, The Tip of the Spear. And that's what he does 24/7. He just looked white as a sheet. And he was talking about generals he knew who were reading the Constitution that night, trying to figure out what they would do and what they were allowed to do if Trump gave them some kind of despicable order that they couldn't conscious following. So yeah, to see somebody who is clearly that fearless, so shaken, that was really something.
The last thing I'll say on the matter is, back then we were recording Minute of Darkness, the minute-by-minute breakdown of Army of Darkness, starring Bruce Campbell. We recorded a bunch of the episodes a month or two before the election, but a lot of the episodes weren't released until after the election. And I remember just listening to that, and first off, I mean, again, we were joking about how Hillary Clinton was just going to mop the floor with Trump. Just hearing the jokes that we said recorded before and then released after is like, oh, yeah, it does not make me look intelligent at all.
Yeah, right.
I think that's going to be our hot takes on the politics, unless we have more, which is always possible. Yeah, we're just trying to distract ourselves, and we haven't talked for a little while, and some interesting news. Some interesting news and cool stuff and geeky stuff that's been released. What do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about Captain Marvel 2 first.
Yeah, was it Nia DaCosta, a 31-year-old woman of color? Wow, this is a heck of a get for her. Being announced to be directing Captain Marvel 2. She's just come out of nowhere and has built up a heck of a resume for herself very quickly, because she also directed and hasn't been released yet the new Candyman movie, co-written by Jordan Peele. It's an exciting call.
I am super excited. I'm excited because she will be the first Black woman to helm a Marvel film, which is one of those things where it's great. Representation matters. It's a shame that it will only just now be happening. So Marvel doesn't really get a cookie for it, but we can be excited that it's happening. And I'm excited to see what she will bring to a series that I've really come to enjoy, because I just this past weekend, after learning this news, watched the film that she wrote the screenplay for and directed, which is out on Hulu now, Little Woods. It stars Tessa Thompson. So it was already in my watch list, but I just kind of bumped it up because of the news. And it's really good. It's gripping, and she really draws these powerful performances out of them. So I think that as a second film in the Captain Marvel series, and that being a good time to go deeper into the character, that it's really intriguing to see what she brings, based on that talent.
How do you feel about them changing directors on this? Because the first one was directed by the tandem of Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, also accomplished directors who've done some good work and who worked on the really good movie Half Nelson, but that was a long time ago. How do you feel about, aside from being excited that DaCosta could do some really cool stuff, but how do you feel about them changing gears on directors like this?
I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other in terms of loyalty for the original directing team. And I have to admit that I haven't seen Half Nelson. So it feels like Captain Marvel came out a million years ago. So it's going to be a film that's created in a completely different environment. And I think that alone is a good reason to have a fresh look at both the character. And then also the MCU is so different now too, because it's post Infinity War, and they made so many major character changes as a result of that. So I think it's fine. I hope that they are not disappointed. And I want to admit to another part of DaCosta's work that I'm not familiar with or planning to check out, which is Candyman. I have never seen the original, and that's because I used to have a phobia of bees. And I understand it's some kind of bee horror. I can't do freaky bees. It's a shame, because that's probably another interesting window into what she might do with Captain Marvel 2, just by virtue of it being another genre film. But no, I can't. I need to have people check it out and let me know what they think, but I can't do it myself.
That's completely fair. I know that you've had your bee issue. On the most recent episode, where I talked with Kyle Crane about horror movies, we talked a little bit about Candyman and how that original movie was 20% classier than you would expect from a horror movie, because it had some interesting background to the story and a really good, Tony Todd is the Candyman, is an excellent actor with a great presence and an amazing voice. And Jordan Peele being associated with that. And the original was a horror movie that ever so delicately dealt with race. And having Jordan Peele, who's an excellent writer, who can do horror that has social commentary about race, being involved with it, makes it seem like it could be one of those rare reboots, remakes, especially in horror, that is an improvement on the original. It'll be interesting to see with that. And also, Candyman, by its nature, can have some interesting visuals, so that'll be intriguing. I don't know if I'll see it. I don't watch a lot of horror movies. We'll see.
You mentioned Minute of Darkness. Is Evil Dead 3, is that that's your threshold of horror right there, sort of horror comedy?
I don't even consider that horror. It's really an adventure movie that happens to have zombies, but funny zombies. It's more Jason and the Argonauts than it is Jason Voorhees.
Nice one.
Yeah, I know. I was so impressed with myself. I'm like, be cool. Don't act like you've been there. Really, my threshold is Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
Because that is a horror movie.
Yeah.
But to show how it is the limit, I never watched the first Evil Dead. I've seen it once or twice, and I can appreciate how innovative it was. But that's an actual creepy movie without the comedy or sort of the over-the-top action to round those edges.
Okay, fair enough.
When was the last time you watched Captain Marvel?
When I got Disney Plus, I said, okay, what are the 5 things I'm going to watch first? And Captain Marvel was right there on the list. But I haven't actually watched it yet. So the last time I saw it was when it was in the theaters. I realized, and I think I talked about this last time, that there were some gaps in my MCU filmography. And so I had to watch the Thor movies, and I really kind of savored them. It's on my list, but I haven't watched it since. What about you?
It's been a while. It's actually one of my kids' favorite Marvel movies. They like the cat. They like Goose. Goose looks a little bit like my cat, Nemo. It's a fine first movie, but I think there's a lot of room to grow. It reminds me a little of Captain America First Avenger, where I liked the movie well enough, but it was very much a setup for Winter Soldier, which I thought was an exponentially better movie. And that was another case where they changed directors. I think Captain Marvel 2 could be an even better movie. I think if they hit all the right beats, we could look at Captain Marvel 2 the same way we looked at Winter Soldier as compared to the first Captain America. I think it could be that much of a leap forward. I really like Brie Larson, and I didn't think Captain Marvel made all the best use of her. I don't think we've seen the best Brie Larson yet in Marvel.
Yes, I agree. And that's sort of what I was thinking as I was watching Little Woods. When I think about the times I've thought, what should I watch? Captain Marvel. And then when I decide not to, it's because of a lot of the other things that go on in the movie besides just developing Captain Marvel's character. A lot of times for me, I don't feel like watching CGI young Samuel L. Jackson for so much of the movie. He's funny in the movie, but it's just...
He looks like a young Samuel L. Jackson until you see him run. I was like, oh.
Right. And just seeing all of that once was enough. I liked the movie. I liked how they developed her character. And the things that stayed with me are just her arc. I'm also not huge on seeing CGI comb over Coulson either. So all of that, the things that did to make it 90s Marvel don't work that well for me. But her own story, the like flashbacks to her as a kid, and then struggling to find her way, and then really coming into her own, and then just coming in the Avengers movies later in like full badass form, but then also like so badass they have to kind of keep her on the shelf a little bit so she doesn't like upset the power balance. So yeah, there is so much potential in the character. That's why it's something that we have to really look forward to.
That'll be the interesting thing, how they deal with it in Captain Marvel 2. And they've said Captain Marvel is the most powerful character in the MCU, so much that she takes a headbutt from Thanos and sort of smirks a little. And then when someone's that powerful, how do you make a movie? And it's the problem that they've had in DC with what do you do with Superman? I have the solution. I don't know if I've shared this with you. This is their way to bring Rogue in. Because in the comics, Rogue from the X-Men, whose power is taking other people's powers, she was an arch nemesis for Captain Marvel. Bring that character in, have her take all or some of Captain Marvel's powers, and then you have her underpowered and her fighting someone who's as strong or even stronger and who drains her strength, and then you could have the conflict.
I mean, that opens up more storytelling possibilities. I'm not so sure how well that would hit the zeitgeist to take this popular character, Captain Marvel, and then say, okay, we're going to, a popular character who is a woman, and then say, okay, we're going to depower her. Do you feel me?
I get what you're saying. It's just, it's always the thing where, with Superman, again, going to Superman, he's the biggest, strongest, fastest. So then you either have to create someone bigger, stronger, faster, or find a way for him to be on the shelf by having him dead for the first 2/3 of Justice League. Always interested is like, okay, how do you do it? Thanos can't headbutt his way past her. So it's either going to be just finding an even bigger threat or finding a way to have her less powered. And I think it works with the arc where this is a character who's always knocked down and gets back up. So having her knocked down is having her powers turned down from 11 to 6, but showing that she's still fearless and she's still tough. And it isn't just the powers that make her special. It's her perseverance and cunning and all the other cool things about her. I think they can make it work, but what you say makes sense.
I see where you're going with that. I've never felt like the fact that Superman is powerful means there's no way to write a great story about Superman because he's so powerful and he's invulnerable. To me, it just means, well, the story has to be about something other than who can win an arm wrestling match. It has to be, how does he balance his role as a hero with other aspects of his life or those kind of things. So, I mean, you could still play out that dynamic of she gets knocked down and she gets back up, but it could be she gets knocked down because of self-doubt. Maybe she does something wrong. She uses her power in a way that harms someone, something like that. So I think that you just have to approach the character and the situations from a different perspective than like, who's going to win the like beat 'em up. And there's still plenty of stories that you can tell with her without her being depowered.
No, it makes complete sense. They have the right director in charge. I have faith. And Marvel doesn't make bad movies. They haven't made a bad movie yet. Even the ones we don't like as much as the others have never been Batman and Robin bad, or Superman Quest for Peace bad, or any of the Fantastic Fours bad. So I have faith. Marvel's very good at least hitting doubles. Not every movie's a home run, but they always get that, use the sports analogy, they always hit that stand-up double.
I have faith too. As a bit of a segue to something else that we wanted to talk about, the way I think about, okay, how do you write for a character that no one could imagine them losing a fight? It's how you write for James Bond. Because nobody ever believes that James Bond is going to lose, but it's still fun to play in the world of James Bond. And the other topic that I was alluding to is, as we record this, just this past weekend, Sean Connery passed away. And so we wanted to do kind of a little bit of a reflection on his career and talk about our favorite roles of his. And of course, he is to many the best of the James Bonds. But would you agree that's an example of a character that it's like, oh, you know they're going to win, but it's still fun to see how they get there?
Yeah, in fact, it's always weird when it looks like Bond isn't winning the fight. I'm thinking of the last Daniel Craig where he was in a fight with Dave Bautista, and he was getting his butt kicked because Dave Bautista is just a huge hulking individual, and basically Bond had to team up with the Bond girl in the movie to sort of outsmart him, but he was being physically overpowered, and it's like, wow, that just seems weird. Bond is always the most suave. He's the one that has the perfect lines. He's the best shot. He's the best card player. He effortlessly beds the most beautiful women, and he's going to win every fight. Sometimes it's, depending on the actor who plays Bond, sometimes it could be a little silly. I like Pierce Brosnan. Whenever he got into fisticuffs, it was like, that's not the sort of Bond he should be. He shouldn't be the toughest guy because he's way too pretty and he's a little thin for that to be believable.
I have to admit something, though. Brosnan's my favorite Bond. There, I said it.
I liked him as Bond as well, but there's shooting Bonds and there's punching Bonds. Connery and Daniel Craig are punching Bonds. Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, Roger Moore are shooting Bonds, where I buy them in their action stuff when they're shooting the bad guys as opposed to when they're engaging in fisticuffs. This
way that you're categorizing the Bonds, is that just off the top of your head? Is that something that you've thought about before? Or is that something that's been discussed like more in depth? It's in the Bond fandom.
Years and years ago, Brian Barishka, my cousin, who's a big Bond fan, was on, It was before they even started filming the upcoming Bond film, the last one with Daniel Craig, and there was all the talk about who would replace him as Bond. Some of the candidates, especially Tom Hiddleston, was the person I made an example of. I think Tom Hiddleston could be a fine James Bond, but he can't be the one duking it out because he's tall and lanky. He needs to be the one with his... What's the gun that Bond carries? The Walter... I don't know my guns.
Neither do I. Internet Movie Gun Database, right? That's where you look that stuff up.
Bond has like a definitive piece that he carries with him. But Tom Hiddleston would need to be the one who's clever and smart, and when he's having the showdown, he's shooting the bad guys as opposed to a lot of him knocking out the bad guys.
Okay, I've got it. The Walter PPK was the weapon of choice for James Bond from the films Dr. No to Tomorrow Never Dies. And again, in Quantum of Silence.
Tom Hiddleston, if he's Bond, he needs to have that gun. Now, if they were to cast Henry Cavill is a big hulking guy, almost to the point where, and I was just having a discussion about this with a friend, is like, if Henry Cavill is Bond, he's actually going to need to lose 20 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
Because he has the bodybuilder physique. The example I use is when Henry Cavill was in Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, that is a great movie.
It's a great movie, and I really liked Henry Cavill in it, but he was his biceps are so big and his chest is so broad, he didn't look right in the suits, these well-tailored suits, and it's like, he looks like if he coughs, the suit will just explode off his torso.
Are you aware that there is a website, JamesBondLifestyle.com?
No, I have not heard of this.
That is just funny to me. I mean, I think the character's cool and all, but you should take your I aspire to the James Bond lifestyle just only so far. I mean, we're talking about a trained killer here.
A guy who's, let's be perfectly honest, kind of rapey in his interactions with women.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of a terrible human being, which is something that Daniel Craig portrays very well. Daniel Craig portraying Bond, Bond is a sociopath who every now and then just has a little pang of humanity, which is compelling.
Yeah, it reminds me of The Boys. I know there's no cursing on this podcast, so I'm trying to...
I have the bleeper.
Clear it up. You've seen The Boys, right?
I have. I haven't watched the second season, but I watched the first.
Okay, this is from the first. So it's when Mother's Milk says, "What can I say? I'm a mother with a heart." You, referring to the butcher, you're just a
Exactly. Going back to our Lockhaven days, Bond movies get dated really quick. Not that long ago, the first Timothy Dalton Bond movie, Living Daylights, was on. And the problem is when you have gadgets in movies, they start looking really chintzy very quick. It's like, wow, this Polaroid instant camera that has a laser is like, put that down. A lot of these Bond movies look dated, and action movies then in the 60s, 70s, because they've worked martial arts and crisper fighting styles into it. A lot of times fight scenes from older movies just sort of look like two guys sort of awkwardly swinging at each other.
If you've ever seen a fight in real life, that's usually what it is. But it's just not how fights in the movies are.
Do you remember in college watching You Only Live Twice? We watched that together.
No, it's what's your memory of that?
Did people ever watch this movie? It was one where Bond goes undercover. They put him in makeup and stuff to make him look like an Asian man.
Oh, ouch. Okay, I can see why I have blocked out that memory. Yeah.
Connery was so cool and has so much presence and charisma, but it was like, this doesn't work at all. First off, just the whole idea of James Bond as a spy doesn't really work, because it's not like it's not Ethan Hunt from the Mission Impossible. He's not a master of disguise or anything. He's just sort of a guy who walks around and introduces himself as like, you're the worst spy in the world.
It's funny you say that, because Nikki and I just restarted watching Alias. They're terrible spies too. It's they wanted it to be an action show, so they want them to constantly be getting in fist fights with people, but they never pull off a single caper without it leading to a big martial arts showdown, which is a terrible way to be a spy. You're supposed to be sneaky. You're supposed to sneak in, sneak out, trick people with your disguise, manipulate people and work their emotions, get close to them. Like The Americans is an excellent example of good spycraft. Yeah, they put Jennifer Connelly in. Wait, is that right?
No, Jennifer Garner.
Jennifer Garner in a really over-the-top outfit, and then she'll do a really bad accent, and it'll work for a couple minutes, but then it's like, nope, it's not working. Now, in the middle of this crowded casino, I'm going to like brutally beat up 5 guards. Then we leave. And for some reason, nobody presses charges, and it all turns out fine. So yeah, bad spycraft all around. We should talk about Sean Connery, though.
First off, do you have a favorite Connery Bond film?
Honestly, not really. He's super cool as Bond, but that's just not the era of Bond movies that I really got into. They sort of blend together for me. The reason that Brosnan is my favorite Bond is because that's when I really got into the movies. And I like the kind of campy tone, especially of his early ones. I don't have a favorite, but what about you?
It's sort of the same, where I find Connery's Bond sort of similar to...
Did you just say Connery?
Yeah, Connery. It's almost like he's his own power couple.
Yeah.
I find Connery's Bond sort of similar to the way I look at first Indiana Jones movie, where when you think of Indiana Jones, you think of the hat, the whip, all those iconic imagery that goes along with it. And there was stuff that was taken from the first movie, but you don't realize when you rewatch Raiders of the Lost Ark, oh, those iconic things, we didn't even realize they were iconic until after the movie. So at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's not wearing the hat. He's not using the bullwhip. He's actually wearing a Nazi soldier's uniform because they didn't know what they had until sort of the second movie. And it's the same thing with Connery as Bond, where it took a couple movies before the Shake and Not Stir, the way the sort of butt kickery was, a lot of the things, it took a couple of movies until they sort of put it all together. Like I said, the movies are dated. I remember the first Connery Bond movie I saw was Never Say Never.
That's like the much maligned later in his career Bond movie, right?
Yeah, basically what happened is he stopped doing the Bond movies. Roger Moore took over the character, but then there were some interesting legal issues where another studio was able to make a Bond movie. And there were some weird rules about which characters could and could not appear in it. But then you had Connery playing an older Bond. And that was actually a plot point. Whereas, like, he's not as fast, he's not as tough as he used to be. Which is also funny because Roger Moore was still playing Bond, and they were the same age. We always think about the young actor taking over the roles. Like, no, they replaced Connery with a guy the same age. I remember what was funny is Connery sort of has 2 eras in his career. He was the hunky guy, and then he was the older guy who women still thought was attractive, but because he was seasoned and experienced and had that sophistication. It was a weird point where he was in between, where he was too old to be like the young hunky guy, but he hadn't leaned into, it was like, I'm going to let my hair go gray. It was one where I just remember one scene from it in particular where he was walking by a boat and this gorgeous 20-something woman walks by him and he's like, what are you, I'm not going to do the accent. I was like, oh, what are you fishing for? And she's like, 6 foot, blue eyes and a nice smile. And it's like, okay, he just asked how you're doing, and you're like, I'm fine. How about we sleep together? And it's like, and it wasn't believable, not because he wasn't a good-looking guy, but he wasn't so outrageously good-looking that beautiful women should just be throwing themselves at him. He was at the point where Sean Connery should be using his charm to woo the woman, not just his raw animal magnetism. When it's like, how are you today? It's like, fine, here's my underwear, and let's see what you're going to make happen.
Yes.
That'll be the clip that plays at the beginning of this episode.
I was hoping a middle-aged white dude would come up and talk to me, and you have made my day, sir.
What's your favorite Connery?
My favorite Connery is the Molly Maguires. It's a 1970 film. It's about Irish-American coal miners in Pennsylvania. Co-stars Richard Harris. And it's an in too deep situation where the coal miners are striking, and Richard Harris is a detective sent in to infiltrate this secret society fighting against the coal company. Then he becomes friends with Sean Connery, and it's that whole dynamic. If In Too Deep is too much of a deep dive for you, you could also see the first Fast and Furious movie, but it's really good. It's set in the late 1800s in Pennsylvania. So it just has always ticked off a lot of boxes for me. Pennsylvania, check. Irish American, I'm half Irish American. Labor activism. Sean Connery, he's 1970, so he would have been 40 then, right? Yes, 40. It's kind of that era that you're talking about. He's got a little bit still of his cool, but then this like low boil of anger. It's really cool. Definitely recommend checking it out. What about you? What's your favorite?
One of my favorite movies of all time is Untouchables.
Excellent.
Great movie. He was so good in it. It's what he won his Oscar for in 1987. It was one of the first movies where he's playing the mentor. So it's him and a young Kevin Costner. He's playing the tough old buzzard. So it's funny. His big action scene is him just getting into a fist fight with another old cop. It's a really fun scene because it's just these two old, grizzled, beat cops just beating the crap out of each other in an alleyway.
Yeah, I love it when they do that, where it's like you can't be in the bulk of the action, but we're going to find you your parallel so you can still have your action sequence. Like when Argyle drives the limo into the van and like messes up the computer guy from Die Hard.
And it works in that movie because it made Untouchables because it made sense. What's really ridiculous is when they try to focus an entire action movie around one guy who is out of shape or isn't that physically impressive, and all of a sudden all the bad guys are equally chubby, out of shape.
Right.
Steven Seagal's the second part of his action career was about, is like, all right, he's out of shape, he can't move too good. And it turns out the rival gang is just a bunch of out-of-shape, doughy Italians who are slowly ambling towards him. It's like, this just looks like a bunch of dads sort of pushing each other during an out-of-control softball game. Liam Neeson in the Taken movies is the same thing, where in Taken 2, which was a fine movie, it was a dumb, fine action movie, but like his final showdown was just him duking it out with a guy who looked like a slightly taller Joe Pesci.
Oh no!
Nobody in the rival in this gang has a gym membership. Connery was so great in that, and it really, I think, was when he became the Sean Connery that from the second phase of his career. They'd been leading up to that. Before that, he'd done Name of the Rose, where he was a mentor figure to Christian Slater. Presidio, where he was a dad. He was Meg Ryan's father in that. But it was really the first movie. He was like, this is who he's going to be throughout this part of his career. He's going to be the suave, likable, older guy. We're not just going to rely on his charisma or sex appeal. It's like, no, he has to have presence as well. It worked really well for him because he had just neat roles after that. And it was nice. And not everybody's able to make that transfer so elegantly. And he was a bankable star for quite a while. It was funny, every now and then they would try to make him the leading man or the romantic lead, and it would be weird. I'm thinking of the movie he did with Michael Douglas's wife. The movie was Entrapment.
Oh yeah, Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Young, gorgeous Catherine Zeta-Jones, and it was like, oh, come on, Sean. We're just not buying this yet. You look a little silly. And I'm thinking of another movie, and it's not a particularly good movie, but Sean Connery was so great in The Rock because he was the older guy, but he was still able to keep up, but he was also really clever. And he was able to give that movie some gravitas that it did not deserve because it was such a stupid movie.
Did you think of sort of like your number 2 and your number 3 Sean Connery roles?
Just for the chutzpah of the movie, I'll give a number 2 Highlander, where he was playing a Spaniard by way of Japan. And I just love the fact that Connery did not care what he was supposed to play. He was just going to have that same accent.
I was curious how much overlap there would be. That one was my number 3.
What's your number 2?
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh, that was so damn good. Here's some trivia. I want to see if you know. What was the age difference between him and Harrison Ford?
Good question. I would guess 10 years.
Close, 12 years. It was a 12 years age difference. Connery had the gray hair. It was nice. It was one of the movies where they didn't force a toupee on him. So he was able to play it. But the chemistry between those two was so great. And these are two actors that you never think of as being funny, but they were so funny together.
Yeah, they were so funny. And it was just a great course correction for the series because he brought a lot of heart to the film by showing you this father-son relationship and taking this infallible, tough character and suddenly seeing, well, when his dad's around, he's still just the son, and his dad doesn't he slap his hand for taking the Lord's name in vain or something like that's for blasphemy. So it was a completely different dynamic, and he really just brought such a great performance. You saw somebody else who kind of operated in that same world as Indiana Jones, but did it with like a different style. So yeah, I mean, that one might be my favorite the more that I talk about it, and I knock Molly Maguire's down to number 2. Molly Maguire's just has a special place in my heart because of what it's about, but just based on performance, I think it is Last Crusade.
One that I would want to give honorable mention, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the Kevin Costner movie where Kevin Costner just wasn't trying. A movie that was a lot more fun than people give it credit for. If nothing else, it had Alan Rickman being awesome. But I remember at the end of the movie, then out of nowhere, there's King Richard as Sean Connery. And I just remember how everyone was like, and it was so cool. And it really brought home, Connery was a movie star. He was a star. When he was on screen, no matter what the role, he just owned the screen. And just that 1 5-minute bit, which apparently he got paid so much money for like 2 days of work. And he was worth every penny because he just shows up and had so much panache and charisma and gravitas. In this short bit, it validated the movie in so many ways that the movie didn't necessarily deserve, because Kevin Costner was a terrible choice as Robin Hood, and god damn that Bryan Adams song.
That's for blasphemy.
Yeah, we could not get away from that song senior year of high school. I know that dates us a little bit.
Well, we're not young people.
No, we're not.
There's a little bit of Sean Connery trivia that I love, and I want to see if you know this. What is Sean Connery's place in the Star Trek universe?
I mean, I guess he could have been on the original series. I'm gonna guess he did voice acting for the animated series.
That is an excellent guess. No, in, what was it? Undiscovered Country. The one where Shatner fought God because, yeah.
Right.
It was Final Frontier. Spock's brother, that role had been offered to Sean Connery. Shatner wanted Sean Connery to play the role, and Sean Connery said, no, thanks. The whole thing is they find They're trying to find the mythical land of Eden. Every culture, Klingon, Vulcan, whatever, had their own name for it, and the Vulcan name for it,
Shakari.
There's just removing some letters from Sean Connery.
Ah, okay.
There's no reason Connery should have been in the movie. It was not a very good role.
Spock's brother? That's a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea, and it wasn't a very interesting character. Cybok was the name, and he was a boring guy. They were trying to. The people who haven't seen the movie, first off, congratulations, because that's one of the dogs of the Star Trek universe. I think that's pretty much referred to as the weakest of those movies. It was Spock's brother, Cybok, who was basically doing some sort of faith healer, religious leader thing. And it was just a boring role that didn't work. What a waste it would have been for Sean Connery to play that character. So, yeah, he smartly sidestepped that disaster. We got to talk about Jarf. You had a list, and I don't have it in front of me. There was a third. Oh, Mandalorian.
We didn't really pace ourselves well. We've only got 6 minutes left. No, that's not true. We've got 12 minutes left, and a huge topic. As we record this, Mandalorian season 2, just the first episode is out. I feel like you would probably have a lot to talk about because the guest star is someone that you're a huge fan of, right? Am I imagining that?
No, you are correct. Timothy Olyphant, who was the star of, in my opinion, one of at least the top 5 best shows in the last 30 years. He was a star of Justified. He also starred in Deadwood. Justified is very much a modern Western, and Deadwood was just a Western. He was such a good casting for Mandalorian because Mandalorian in a lot of ways is a space Western. And he got to play the sheriff of a small desert town on Tatooine wearing Boba Fett's armor. A little bit of trivia for folks, whoever has watched Deadwood, there was an alien bar. There was a bar in this desert town with an alien bartender. And that alien bartender was played by a guy who played a bartender on Deadwood.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's completely unrecognizable, but they even joked about, like, during filming, they recreated a famous scene from Deadwood when there was a lot of profanity behind the scenes to make everybody laugh because Jon Favreau directed that episode, the episode 1 of season 2, and he was a big fan of Deadwood, which was probably why he cast everybody. Oliphant did a great job, and he'll be back. It looks like they're doing the same thing with season 2 that they did with season 1, where every episode or every other episode, they're going to introduce a character, and when we get to the end of the season, I'm betting they bring all these people back for the final 1 or 2, the finale of the season. Speaking
of unrecognizable, did you have any clue that was John Leguizamo voicing Gor Koresh at the beginning?
No idea. When I found that out, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God.
I know. I saw his name in the credits and I was like, wait, who was he? And I had to look it up. And then when I rewatched it, he's just putting on such a different voice. He really had a lot of fun with it. And he just lowered his voice and he plays a lot of really brash, over the top characters and he's a lot more subdued. So I really liked the performance that he brought for that.
They've had some really neat cameos that you don't even know they're there. Jason Sudeikis was one of the stormtroopers in the first season. And I just found out like a week ago that Nick Nolte was in the first season, voiced a character in the first season of Mandalorian.
Oh, see, I did recognize his voice.
It's one of those things where as soon as I saw, I was like, Nick Nolte, it's like, oh, of course that was Nick Nolte.
Right.
I think about Nick Nolte so little.
Right.
I mean, Nick Nolte's sort of an actor who is gone under the radar for a while. So if he pops up and you're not expecting it, and especially when he's voicing a character that looks so different than him.
Right.
So it's not like they're trying to make an alien who looks like, oh, that's Nick Nolte with gills. No, it's a completely different looking person that just happens to have his voice. How do you feel about the fact that this is a streaming show that they're releasing weekly? Because Mom's ticked off about it.
Oh, no.
She's lost her patience for waiting for weekly television.
I am a fan of that. I like to savor, especially as we've been leading up to this election. I'm pretty busy. If they released the whole season last week, I probably wouldn't be done watching it yet. So I was actually relieved since we had planned to talk about it. I'm like, oh, good. It's just one episode. I'm sure that I can get that. I can get that watched. And so I'm a Gen Xer. So I am old enough to remember when you would just wait every week for a new episode of a show you love to come out. And it just gives you more time to sit with it. So I'm a fan. What about you?
I like it. The thing about releasing the entire season at one time, you lose cliffhangers, and Mandalorian is a show that benefits from cliffhangers. And I'm thinking of the end of last season where Mando and his friends are surrounded and the bad guys have the child, and it's like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen?
Oh, yeah. That time when we didn't know what was going to happen with the child, it was really nice to be worrying about the fate of Baby Yoda than worrying about what's happening in the world, at least for that 1 week.
When you watch 5 episodes in an hour or, finish off a season real quick. Now, here's the thing. I didn't watch the first season until all the episodes were out because I've been hurt by Star Wars a couple times. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but then it just took me 2 episodes like, oh my God, I should have been on this from the beginning. But I remember you and I were both fans of 24, and 24 lived and died by cliffhangers.
Oh, yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and a lot of those great shows that you and I watched when we were in our 20s were great cliffhanger shows, and it's become a lost art. I'm even thinking of even The Office. And I'm thinking about the later seasons of The Office, the last season specifically, when you were worried about Jim and Pam, if that marriage was going to work out. I remember that show. I remember watching one episode where it really looked like, oh my God, I don't know if these characters are going to make it, which is ridiculous because of course they're going to make it. But I remember losing sleep over it and being excited when the next episode is like, okay, is this the episode where we're going to finally figure out if they're going to straighten out their relationship? There's something to be said for that. When it's that easy to just watch the next episode, you lose something. And so I think it's the right thing to do based on the nature of the show. And I think it's a well-paced show. I think they don't try to pad their episodes. Like some of their episodes are only 38, 42 minutes long. I think it's the right move because they don't try to add 2 monologues to pad the time. And sometimes Netflix shows and Hulu shows feel like they're padding time.
Yeah, I agree with all that. So you like the format. I can tell you one thing that really stood out to me about the episode. I'd love to hear you say the same. I shared an article about this in the Star Wars Minute Listener Society, which I'll get to in a second. But just in general, I liked how they showed you more of the Tuscans society. The item that I shared an article about was the fact that for the Tuscan Sign Language, they hired a deaf actor named Troy Kotsur to play one of the Tuscan Raiders and also help create the sign language. So it would have that kind of authenticity. That's really just cool in and of itself. Just it's cool from the perspective of representation. And then also just when you hire someone who has lived experience, it adds more depth to things. It's always a win-win when you go that route. And then just you saw other things that's about the Tuscans who are so one-dimensional in the original trilogy. It's like, oh, scary, they're shooting at us from the hills. But you see how they care for their banthas, like brushing the teeth, and then the small town that the marshal is from, it's like trying to cooperate with them. So I thought all of that was really cool. And that's just the Tuscan Raiders have such a cool look with their really scary masks with the like straggling teeth, but to see a different side of them, I thought was really fun.
Yeah, because in Star Wars, they were just bad guys. They were just vaguely bad guys for the sake of being bad guys. And in that episode, it was like Mando was saying, it's like, oh no, they're brutal people because they live in a brutal place, but their word is good. Like showing, okay, yeah, of course they're going to behave in a certain way in a certain situation. They're not nice because they can't be, but they have to live by their word because you don't have anything else in the desert. I thought it was very telling at the end of that episode, spoiler alert, when, the giant monsters killing people, they were just killing them because they were the ones who put themselves on the front line.
Yeah.
All right, Jarf. It's 8:01. Just to give everyone a moment in time, it looks like the results are starting to come in, and nothing surprising has happened so far. Kentucky went to Trump because, of course, it did.
Right.
Virginia went to Biden.
Oh, nice.
But I don't think that's not a surprise, right? Is that a surprise?
See, this is why I need to start seriously turning my attention to following that. No, and also start drinking.
You mean you haven't started yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh, my gin and tonic is gone. My ears are red and my face is flushed. So I got to learn how to start doling out a little better.
Well, I wanted to leave listeners with just a plug for where you might find me, as I don't have a show of my own right now, although Joe versus a Minute is complete and available to binge. But I have just been like roaming the podcast sphere, getting into adventures. I am in a couple of weeks recording a couple episodes of Rocky Horror Minute. So that's another throwback to our college years. And so I'm going to be on minutes 41 and 42 of Rocky Horror Minute.
Very, very, very early into our friendship, our friend Felicia invited us to go to Rocky Horror and do the play along and dress in the costumes. And we had a pretty amazing time doing that. And that was a lot of fun. That's an important movie in our friendship.
Yes, 100%. Okay. Things have taken a turn here with...
Nikki is swearing at the TV. Is she?
No, we've got a sick dog. So I got to go. It's been a blast. Let's hope that by the time you're hearing this, we've got good results. And I will see you in the funny pages.
2, 3, 4.
That wraps episode 213. Big thanks to Jarf. I'm happy to report he's been able to exhale since election night. I was worried about him. Also, big thanks to Katie. She always brings the best questions. Next time on the Cosmic Geppetto podcast, Katie returns to talk about what has been happening in the world of Harry Potter. It's not fantastic. Till then, as Jarf already said,
see you in the funny pages.
I point out all my enemies just so my fans bring them down.
Subscribe to the Cosmic Geppetto podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever quality podcasts can be found. Rate and review us while there. Follow us on Twitter at CosmicGPod, and we will follow you back. Unless you're a jerk. We don't follow jerks. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cosmic Geppetto. We love hearing your ideas for upcoming episodes. Email us at cosmicgeppetto@comcast.net.
here's my underwear, and let's see what you're going to make happen.
I throw out any shit I want and no one trumps that card. So dazzled and distracted by your fantasy of Hildegard. Isn't anybody going to stop me? I don't want this job. I don't want this job, my God. Can't you tell I'm unworthy? You ask about my plan, but baby, my plan is to win. To wind up all the tops and watch the others keep the spin. You handing me grenades is just compelling me. Oh, the pin